There's a quiet war going on every single day, not on the battlefield, not in politics, but in your wallet, in your thoughts, and in the silent corners of your habits. It's the battle between who you are and who you could become. Most people don't lose this war in a moment. They lose it in 1,000 tiny decisions, a dollar spent without thought, a habit repeated without reflection, a dream abandoned for the comfort of just getting by. But here's what I discovered early in life. Money is not just currency, it's a mirror. It reflects your philosophy, your self-respect, and your ability to think long-term in a short-term world. And today I'm not just going to give you tips. I'm going to give you tools. 7 rules that turn a broke farm boy with no college education into a man of freedom, influence, and peace. Because here's the truth. Wealth is not what you have in the bank. It's what you have in your mind, your habits, and your discipline. So if you're ready, let's begin writing not just your finances, but your future. I was once taught a simple lesson that changed everything for me. It's not what you earn that builds wealth. It's what you keep. And more importantly, what you do with what you keep. You see, I didn't always have much. In fact, there was a time when I was dead broke, behind on my bills, and full of excuses. But then I learned a philosophy so simple, so powerful, that it shifted my entire future. Spend less than you earn, and invest the difference. Most people don't become poor because they don't make money. They become poor because they never learn to control it. If you make $1,000, 0 cents a month, and spend $1,100, 0 cents, you're digging a hole. But if you make $1,000, 0 cents, and learn to live on $700, 0 cents, you're already on your way to freedom. That 30% becomes your empire seat. 10% to invest, 10% to give, 10% to educate yourself. That's how you build something bigger than bills. I remember asking my mentor, how do I begin turning things around? He said, keep a dime out of every dollar. That sounded small to me, just 10 cents. But the wisdom was in the habit, not the amount. The discipline of living on less creates room for your mind to think, to plan, to grow. It gives you margin, not just financially, but mentally, margin to dream. And let me say this plainly, people stay broke trying to look rich. They buy clothes to impress others, cars to feel important, gadgets they don't need. But all that flash burns fast. Simplicity, on the other hand, is powerful. It's not glamorous, but it builds fortune quietly. I wore the same pair of shoes for 3 years while I was learning how to grow my money. I drove a modest car. I invested instead of indulging. Wealth begins with a choice. Control, not chaos. Responsibility, not reaction. You master the game when you tell your money where to go, not the other way around. Because the real luxury isn't in spending, it's in having. I learned early on that depending on a single source of income is like standing on one leg. You might balance for a while, but the moment life gives you a push, you're down. Most people put all their trust in one paycheck, one employer, one source, and that's dangerous. The secret to building wealth that lasts is to develop multiple streams of income, so if one dries up, the others continue to flow. My journey started with one income, my job. I showed up, worked hard, collected my check. But I quickly realized if that job vanished, my entire livelihood would vanish. So I began asking myself, what else can I build on the side? The answer didn't come overnight, but the mindset did. I started selling, teaching, writing, small things that eventually turned into bigger things. Before long, those side efforts became steady flows of income that worked even when I didn't. See, wealth doesn't happen because you work harder. It happens because you learn how to make your money, your ideas, and your efforts compound. You might start with your job, but don't stop there. Create something others need. Write something they can buy. Own something that pays you without clocking in. A small rental property, a digital course, a dividend-paying stock, even royalties from something you built years ago. There's a difference between earning a living and building a life. A job gives you the first. Multiple income streams give you the second. I remember meeting a man who said, if I don't work, I don't eat. I told him that's a dangerous place to be. Let's build something that feeds you while you sleep. The great philosopher Seneca once said, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Multiple incomes are built on preparation, intentional effort, creative thinking, and long-term vision. So build while you can, plant seeds where you can, and water them daily. Eventually, you'll find yourself surrounded by trees you no longer have to climb because they bear fruit even while you rest. I was once told, don't ask for things to get easier, ask to get better. And that line hit me like a hammer. Most people spend their lives working hard at their jobs, showing up every day, putting in the hours, and hoping that somehow life will reward them. But let me tell you something that changed my life forever. Work harder on yourself than you do on your job. See, your job may give you a paycheck, but your personal development will build your fortune. If you want to earn more, lead more, and live more, you've got to become more. Your income is a direct reflection of your personal growth. If you want to double your income, don't wish for a raise. Work on doubling your value. I used to work hard all day and come home exhausted. But I realized I wasn't growing. I was just grinding. Then I began reading 10 pages a day. Just 10. I picked up books on mindset, leadership, communication. I started listening to recordings during my commute instead of the radio. I took notes. I asked questions. Slowly, I could feel something changing. Not out there, but in here. The moment you commit to becoming a lifelong learner, the world starts to open. Because people pay for value, not time. The market rewards those who grow. And value doesn't come from a title, it comes from skill, wisdom, and perspective. One year I made more money teaching others what I'd learned than I ever made working hourly. Not because I was better than anyone else, but because I had become better than I used to be. A man once told me, if you pour a gallon of wisdom into a thimble-sized mind, most of it's going to spill out. That's why you've got to expand who you are to receive more of what life has to offer. Read the books, learn the skill, master your craft. Upgrade your philosophy. Because when you become more valuable, the world doesn't just pay attention. It pays. Wishing for wealth is a common pastime. But I've learned that wishing is not a strategy, it's a distraction. Everyone hopes to be financially free someday, but hope without a plan is like sailing without a compass. You may feel the wind, but you'll never reach the shore. You see, money responds to direction, not emotion. The people who become wealthy aren't necessarily the smartest or the luckiest. They're the ones who decided early on to be intentional. I remember a time when I was making more money than ever before, but I was more stressed than ever too. Why? Because I had no plan. Money would come in and it would go out faster than I could track it. I was living at the mercy of every urge, every whim, every unexpected expense. Then one evening, sitting at the kitchen table with a notepad and a calculator, I drew my first real financial blueprint. It wasn't fancy, but it was the beginning of freedom. A plan puts your money to work for you. It tells every dollar where to go before it wanders off. You wouldn't build a house without a blueprint. Why build a future without one? Budgeting isn't about restriction, it's about vision. It gives you power. A written goal, a set of steps, a schedule. And soon what once felt impossible becomes predictable. The ancient proverb says, where there is no vision, the people perish. And I say, where there is no financial vision, your wealth will perish. So write it down. Know your numbers. Understand your inflow and outflow. Allocate not just for expenses, but for investment, for giving, and for growth. Because when you lead your money with purpose, you no longer chase it. It begins to follow you. The wealthy don't leave their future to chance. They design it. One of the most powerful principles I ever learned is this. Success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day. But the trick isn't just knowing the discipline. It's building it into your life so it happens whether you feel like it or not. When it comes to wealth building, discipline must become a system. That's where automation enters the scene. Most people fail financially not because they lack intelligence, but because they rely too much on willpower. And willpower is like a battery. It runs out. Emotion gets in the way. One day you're feeling responsible, the next day you feel like rewarding yourself. And suddenly the money meant for investing is sitting in the driver's seat at the shopping mall. That's why I learned early to take the emotion out of the equation. Automate the good habits before your feelings get a chance to interfere. I started small. Just a simple monthly transfer from my checking account into a savings account. Then one for investments, then one for my retirement fund. It wasn't about how much. It was about the principle. Every month, like clockwork, the money moved without me having to think about it. And that quiet little habit started compounding into something powerful. Let me give you an example. Let's say you invest just $100, 0 cents a month into a basic fund that earns 8% annually. That's $1,200, 0 cents a year. Over 20 years, without ever increasing that amount, you'd have over $55,000, 0 cents. That's the power of discipline paired with time. And the beauty is, it doesn't rely on mood, motivation, or memory. It just happens. Automation is the invisible hand of wealth where it doesn't shout, it doesn't brag, but it does the work. You can't build a fortune with scattered energy. You build it with systems that run while you sleep, while you work, while you live. Because wealth isn't just about making money, it's about making good decisions automatic. When I first heard the idea of giving away a portion of my income, I'll admit it didn't sit well. I was struggling. I had bills, and the last thing on my mind was generosity. But then someone shared a truth that struck me like a thunderbolt. Giving isn't just about others, it's about you. It's about training your own mind to believe in abundance, even when the evidence around you still looks like lack. You see, most people hold tightly to what little they have, fearing that if they let any of it go, they'll be left with nothing. But that fear is a trap. It keeps you small, stuck, and suspicious. Giving breaks that trap. It rewires the mind from scarcity to abundance. And once your mindset shifts, your results follow. I began small, a few dollars here and there, sometimes to my church, sometimes to someone in need, sometimes just to help without being asked. And do you know what happened? I didn't go broke. In fact, I felt richer, not just in money, but in confidence. Because I was no longer a prisoner to fear. I was acting like someone who had more than enough. And gradually I became that person. It reminds me of the law of sowing and reaping. A farmer doesn't hoard his seeds because he's afraid of losing them. No, he puts them in the ground. Why? Because he knows the harvest doesn't come from keeping, it comes from planting. And when you give wisely, when you give with joy, you're planting seeds in good soil. You may not see the return tomorrow, but rest assured, the harvest is coming. The great thinkers of old said, "A generous man will prosper. He who refreshes others will himself be refreshed." That principle hasn't changed. Give what you can with wisdom and purpose. Don't just give emotionally. Give intentionally. Make it a habit, not a gesture. And over time, you'll find that generosity isn't subtraction, it's multiplication. Because the hand that opens to give is the same hand that's open to receive. In the early days of my financial journey, I learned a lesson that reshaped my entire outlook on money. You must become the master of your money or it will quietly master you. Most people drift through life financially blind, spending emotionally, reacting instead of planning, and hoping it'll all somehow work out in the end. But hope is not a strategy. Precision is. I started by tracking every dollar, every single one, not because I was obsessed with money, but because I was finally learning to respect it. You see, money is like a servant. It will go where you tell it to go, but only if you give it clear, firm instructions. And you can't direct something you don't observe. I wrote down what I earned, what I spent, where it went, and why. That little habit gave me clarity. And with clarity comes power. I kept a ledger by hand at first, then later I used simple spreadsheets. I wasn't trying to be an accountant. I was trying to be aware. Because once you start measuring something, it begins to improve. That's a law of life, whether it's fitness, relationships, or finance. As the old saying goes, you can't manage what you don't measure. People often ask why they seem to run out of money before they run out of month. The answer is usually simple. They're not paying attention. Money, like a garden, needs tending. If you leave it alone, weeds grow. But if you track it, if you nurture it, it starts to multiply. I've met people with high incomes who were broke because they had no idea where their money went. And I've seen those earning modest wages build wealth steadily because they tracked every dollar with purpose and discipline. Wealth doesn't begin with big income. It begins with big awareness. Remember, money flows where attention goes. So give your finances the gift of attention. Know where every dollar is sleeping tonight and make sure it's working for you by morning. When I was young, I made the mistake many do. I believed I had time. I believed wealth would come later, after I figured everything out. But time, I discovered, is not neutral. It's either working for you or against you. And every day you delay a right decision, a good habit, a new investment, you're not just losing a day. You're losing compound interest, momentum, opportunity. One of the greatest lessons I ever learned is this. Time is not just a clock on the wall. It's capital. It's either your greatest asset or your costliest liability. A man who invests $5.00 a day, starting in his 20s, may retire with a fortune, while another who waits until his 40s, even doubling the amount, ends up far behind. That's the silent power of compounding, not just of money, but of actions, thoughts, and disciplines. It's not about speed. It's about steady, intentional steps. I've seen people try to sprint to success, chasing shortcuts, flipping coins, and hoping for windfalls. That's not how fortunes are built. Real wealth is built brick by brick, habit by habit. Read a page today, and tomorrow you'll know something you didn't. Save $10, 0 cents today, and in time you'll own what others still rent. Write a paragraph, make a call, build a product. It all stacks up if you keep stacking. There was a man I once mentored. Quiet, consistent, no flash. He started with almost nothing. But he honored his time, invested it wisely, turned small habits into daily rituals. Years passed, and his peers, distracted by noise, laughed at his pace. But when they looked again, they saw him standing on the mountain they never began to climb. The philosopher Heraclitus once said, "Character is destiny." But I'd add this, character is built in hours no one else sees. So don't waste today waiting for the perfect moment. The moment is now, because every hour you turn into growth, skill, savings, or value, that hour becomes a seed. And a few planted seeds over enough time create an orchard you'll live on for the rest of your life. Let me tell you something about the mind. It responds to clarity, and it thrives on urgency. Too many people drift financially because their goals are vague. They say, I want to be rich, or I need to save more. That's not a goal, that's a wish. A real goal is specific, it's measurable, and it comes with a deadline. And if you want to create serious financial momentum, give yourself 90 days. Not a year, not someday. 90 days of focus can change your life. Pick one clear money target, not 5, just one. Maybe it's saving $1,000 0 cents, paying off a nagging credit card, or earning an extra $3,000 0 cents from a side hustle. Make it bite-sized, make it real. Then break it down. That's where the magic starts. If it's a $1,000 0 cent savings goal, that's about $334 0 cents a month. That's roughly $84 0 cents a week. Now, it's not overwhelming, it's manageable. But don't just plan it, track it. Visuals matter. I've used whiteboards, note cards, and little habit calendars stuck on the fridge. Why? Because what you see, you do. When your progress is visible, it motivates. You see that little green check mark and something inside says, let's do it again. That's psychology working for you instead of against you. Every week, sit down for 5 minutes and ask, did I move closer or farther away from my goal? No guilt, just awareness. Adjust if you need to. Celebrate if you should. Because small wins, repeated consistently, create momentum. And momentum is what lifts the heavy load. I once set a goal to save $1,500 0 cents in 90 days while my income was modest. I canceled a few expenses, sold a few things, took on a weekend gig, and tracked every dollar. I hit that goal 3 days early, not because I was brilliant, but because I was focused. And that feeling, it changes how you see yourself. You start to believe again. You start to feel in control again. That's what a 90-day money goal can do. It's not just about the dollars. It's about becoming the kind of person who finishes what they start, and that kind of person can do anything. One of the most overlooked money principles isn't in a ledger or investment portfolio. It's found in your circle. Who you associate with will quietly shape how you think, how you talk, and ultimately, how you act. And that influence, whether you realize it or not, determines the size of your vision and the strength of your financial habits. See, people who think in terms of cost are always asking, What's the cheapest option? But people who think in terms of value ask, what return will I get if I invest here, whether it's time, money, or effort? That mindset shift changes everything. When you associate with people who constantly search for bargains, shortcuts, and discounts in every area of life, you begin to adopt the belief that life is about getting by. But wealth thinkers play a different game. They talk about opportunities, not excuses. They speak of investing, not just spending. They ask how to create value, not how to escape responsibility. I remember early in my career, I was invited to a gathering of business owners. They weren't flashy, they didn't brag, but they asked sharp questions. Questions like, what are you building that will outlast you? How are you increasing your value to the marketplace? I sat in that room quietly at first, soaking it in. And I realized something. I had been spending too much time around people who only talked about problems, never solutions. That night I made a decision. I would change my circle. You want to build wealth? Find people who challenge you to think bigger, people who remind you of your potential, not your limitations. Surround yourself with men and women who aren't afraid to invest in themselves, who believe that creating value is the highest aim, not finding the lowest cost. It's contagious. Their language becomes your language. Their habits become your habits. And your future begins to rise. You don't rise to the level of your intentions. You rise to the standard of your environment. Choose wisely. Now, if you've listened closely, you've heard more than just money rules. You've heard a philosophy for life. Wealth isn't about luck or lightning strikes. It's about small decisions made daily with discipline. It's about living with intention, growing yourself, planting seeds and choosing the right soil. It's about tracking every dollar, setting real goals, and surrounding yourself with people who think in terms of value, not limitation. The journey to wealth begins in the mirror with who you become, not just what you earn. So here's the call. Don't just hear these principles. Live them. Pick one rule tonight and apply it. Start small. Save that extra $10.00. Cancel that needless expense. Read the book you've been avoiding. Join a better circle. Whatever it is, start. Because motion creates clarity and action compounds. You'll be amazed at what happens when you stop waiting and begin doing. Remember, the greatest fortune isn't what you acquire, it's who you become in the process. And the only thing standing between where you are and where you could be is the decision to begin. So begin. Take the first step tonight and never look back.